Hello everyone, and welcome to the Traphagen Guitar Workshop. Today we're going to talk about back and side material, basically just backs, and why you need a back. Because all the back material will create a different sound in your guitar. Now the reason you need a back, here's a guitar. It's a shop experimental guitar. Many different experiments have happened on this guitar, and it currently does not have a back. You can hear that it sounds sort of like a banjo. There's no back on the guitar. And when I strum this guitar, and if I put my ear near the face of the guitar, there's a fair amount of sound. But if I put my ear on the inside of the guitar, there's a lot more sound. So we're going to get rid of this little annoying banjo guitar and put it over here. And we're going to actually talk about the wood and what the back does. So with the back on the guitar, when you play your guitar, the energy from the top and the top pumping in and out and rocking side to side, those energy waves are actually bouncing off the back and coming out the sound hole, or sound ports if your guitar has sound ports. I'm not a huge fan of sound ports. They act like a monitor for the player, so the player can hear it better. But in a concert hall, the guitar, if the sound ports are too large, does not project as well. It also tends to make the sound a little more mid-rangey, because essentially what you're doing with sound ports is creating a very large sound hole. So the back is, the energy is bouncing off the back and it's coming out the sound hole of your guitar. There's a little bit of sound that actually comes off the face of the guitar. It's called laminar flow, and some sound comes off there, especially the higher partials. But the majority of the sound and energy is bouncing off the back of the guitar and coming out. Some people try to make the back so they actually flex and pump a little bit like the top. The problem with that is if your top is moving in and your back is moving this direction, the two of them are going to cancel that note or that frequency range out, and you're going to get a wolf note in your guitar. So you really don't want the backs pumping a lot, because there will be times where the top and back are not working together, and those notes will be very dull and dead. If they're working together, those notes will be louder than other notes. So you tend to make the back pretty rigid, so it's not moving much. You can feel it on your body, you can feel it vibrating, but it's not pumping the way a top will pump. So the backs are usually fairly rigid, and you often, or most of the time, use harder materials for the back than you use on the top, and denser, heavier materials, because that helps with the projection and the sustain of the guitar. So there's a lot of woods you can use for backs. Now there's a lot of woods being experimented with, because so many of the old traditional woods are no longer available, or they're extremely expensive. The permitting to get them is complex and difficult. Not impossible, it can be done, but it's just more difficult. Fortunately, I've had woods for many, many, many years. I have Brazilian rosewood from before it was even listed as an endangered wood. So there's lots of different woods being made, and what the woods that people are trying to find that will work are woods that are denser to help project the sound out. There aren't many that are more beautiful than the rosewoods, but beauty is only part of the equation in why you have the back of your guitar. It's sound and sound projection. So I'm going to go through a few woods here for you so you can see what they are. So your softer woods are usually the most common, would be Honduran mahogany. Now this is a beautiful piece of flamed Honduran mahogany. You can see the flames in it. And it has quite a nice tap tone for mahogany. This is pretty dense mahogany. But you can hear that it's not super bright. So what mahogany will do for you and the sound of your guitar, it'll give you kind of a mellow, warm sounding instrument, not really bright crystalline trebles, but more of a warm, rich, just nice mellow sound is what mahogany will do. Another softer wood that I use is Spanish cypress. This Mediterranean cypress, also known as Spanish cypress. This is nice master grade wood. This is actually harder than Honduran mahogany. This, so you can hear the tap tone is a little brighter. It's going to produce a little brighter guitar. It's going to be very earthy sounding. Cypress guitars project phenomenally well. If you're looking for a guitar that you really wanted to project outwards, Cypress is one of the best woods you can use for projection. And you can use it with either a spruce top or a cedar top. And I've made, it's not just for flamenco guitars, I've made classical guitars, regular classicals with this. I've made steel string guitars with nice hard Spanish cypress back and sides with a cedar top. Sounds phenomenal. Amazing. The cedar adds more sustain. This adds the projection, and it's a great tone wood, not often seen in steel string guitars, and not often seen in classicals, mostly only seen in flamenco guitars, but it works well for all of them. And it's actually a very hard wood to get now as well in this caliber, this quality. This is a master grade back here, and I have many sets of master grade wood. Beautiful, beautiful wood. Another wood I have here is Zeracote. It's very flashy, very beautiful wood. Not a great tap tone. A little bit dull. It's okay. I would not use this on a classical guitar. I would only use it on a steel string guitar because steel string guitars have much more tension. They're obviously brighter. So this would be better in a steel string guitar. Not my favorite wood, but it makes fine instruments and it's good. This is a piece of Bolivian rosewood, also known as pau ferro. Now this is I bought this many years ago in big plank forms, like this. This is very dense wood, it's very heavy. You can hear how dense it is. Very hard. This would be the equivalent to, it's almost equivalent to Honduran rosewood. It's actually a little denser and harder than Indian rosewood. This is perfectly vertical grain piece, not flashy looking, but would make a fine back once it's sliced up. Here's some very old Indian rosewood. This is quite dark. This is pre-plantation wood. So pretty much all the Indian rosewood you buy now is plantation wood, unless you buy somebody else's collection or stash of wood. The plantation wood is much wider grain. It's not as dense as this. This is very good. Nice and hard. Hear the energy from it. It makes very good guitars, but it creates sort of a neutral sound to your guitar. What the back does primarily, along with projection forward, it affects the tonal color and the tonal palette of the guitar. So depending on what tonal color and palettes that you like would determine what back and sides you would use. So Indian rosewood I consider in the rosewood families to be neutral. It doesn't have as much sustain as Honduran rosewood or Brazilian rosewood or even this Bolivian rosewood. Doesn't have the color palette that those other rosewoods have. But it's a very stable wood. It's more stable than Brazilian, although I have no trouble with Brazilian rosewood as long as people take care of their guitars and humidify them properly. Here's Honduran rosewood. As you can see, it's lighter colored. This has beautiful black stripe in it. A little bit of sapwood here on the edge. This is very dense wood. It's more akin to African blackwood, which I don't have any African blackwood because I don't want to spend the money for it. It's cost way more than I think that it's worth. I would rather use Honduran rosewood. Honduran rosewood, phenomenal sustain. Beautiful sustain. Very hard, very dense. This is one of the heavier rosewoods. It's heavier than Brazilian rosewood. It's heavier than Indian rosewood. It's more like African blackwood or cocobolo. Cocobolo is another beautiful wood, Mexican rosewood, very heavy and dense. It's difficult to work with because it's so oily. Also, it is one of the most toxic woods to work with. The dust from cocobolo is quite toxic. You have to wear a mask when you're working with it all the time. Now, my favorite rosewoods for back and sides are Brazilian rosewood. And I know that they're harder to get now, but I've had Brazilian rosewood for many, many years, and it's not a problem. All my Brazilian rosewood is salvage wood. Here are two pieces of Brazilian. This is Brazilian rosewood that came from stumps that were salvaged. The stumps, I've been to Brazil several times. The stumps are just found out in the fields. The farmers find them, or in the forest, and they're dug up, and they're guarded like gold. And they're completely soaking wet because they've been out in the rainforest. So you have to be careful when you dry them out. So even before you slice the wood, you have to let it dry for a while first. And then when you slice it, you have to wrap it in like plastic wrap to keep it from drying out too fast. But this wood, I've had most of my Brazilian rosewood carbonated. The stump wood, the majority of the stump wood was cut in the 1930s. So this piece of wood is from the 1930s, plus or minus 20 years. The carbonating tells you when the tree was cut, not how old the tree was. The tree could have been a few hundred years old. But this wood was cut in the 1930s. Very good wood. Very complex tap tone. Quite a bit of sustain, both on the high register and the low register. And the back and side wood, like I've said, affects the tonal color of your guitar. It affects the color palette of the guitar. Here's a very old piece. I call it my ancient Brazilian rosewood. This has been carbon dated to have been cut in the 1850s. So this wood is over 200 years old. A phenomenal tap tone, even more sustained. Beautiful, beautiful sounding set. Brazilian rosewood will give you the most complex color palette of all the rosewoods. It will give you the most subtleties of color palette of all the rosewoods. Indian rosewood is fine, but it's a more neutral color palette. Honduran rosewood is closer to Brazilian, but it's actually denser and heavier than Brazilian. You actually get even more sustain out of it. So if you don't like a lot of sustain, you would choose Brazilian rosewood over Honduran, but Honduran makes fabulous guitars. Some people consider it one of the best rosewoods of all the rosewoods to build guitars out of. So once again, I hope that was helpful. The back and sides are affecting the color palette of your guitar, and you can choose woods accordingly depending on what type of overall sound you want from the instrument. And they try to match the back and sides with the wood you're choosing for the top. All of these woods will work fine with spruce or cedar tops, but they'll sound different with a spruce or cedar top. Part of that's the top, of course, and the other part is the rosewood itself, or the cypress, or the mahogany. So that's how you go about choosing your back and side wood. It really depends on the color and the style of guitar that you're looking for, and the style of playing that you're playing. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, you can contact me through my website at traphagenguitars.com. You can also go to my YouTube channel, and on the sidebar there is a library link there. You can click on the library, and there's lots of sound clips of my guitars being played with many different back and side woods, different top woods as well, but back and side woods. We'll have mahogany, Indian, Honduran rosewood, Brazilian rosewood, cypress, and you can hear the different tonal qualities of all those guitars. So if you just go in the library section and listen to those sound clips, you'll get a better idea of what the different woods sound like and what my guitars sound like overall. So once again, thanks for visiting the shop of Traphagen Guitars, and I'll see you again soon.